Joining us here on India Today to really understand what their stand is on these hospital deaths, this strike that's happened, is Mr. Boaz Bismuth, who is a member of parliament from Israel. Mr. Bismuth, thank you for joining us on India Today. Your country has very clearly claimed you have no role in the strike on the hospital. But there are some questions, and we just played out a report that leads to questions about whether there was an attack on this hospital or was it just a parking lot. So what's Israel's stand on this particular strike, first of all?
You're talking about the hospital attack, and I would say one thing, and maybe I will challenge you by asking a very easy question that everybody knows the answer. Terrorists, usually in Gaza, terrorists usually, or also, civilians, where do they hide? They hide in hospitals. You know why they hide in hospitals? Because they know we don't attack hospitals. So this myth, on the contrary, all this attack, you learn a few things from this attack. First of all, you see Palestinian propaganda. For them, immediately Israel is accused. But then everybody understands that it's not Israel, but propaganda is working, of course. Then the second thing that you see is Palestinians really don't care about life itself. Why? Because a few days before, they slaughtered our babies, and then they kill their own children. So you see, this is what you learn. This is what you learn from this attack, this missile or rocket launched by mistake over the hospital.
There's a comment you made, Mr. Bismuth, in the beginning, saying that it's a known fact, and you challenged me, saying terrorists hide in hospitals. Are you then justifying an attack on a hospital?
Did I say that I justify hospitals? Of course I don't justify. I am someone who justifies life. I am someone who's against war, against killing. I mean, on the contrary, do you think I justify anything that deals with death? On the contrary, let me only remind you that you're now interviewing a member of parliament where his country was attacked and his kids were slaughtered. Huh? Women were abused. This is what we're talking. So I see that you put the emphasis on the atrocity taking place by Gaza. And by the way, responsible for that is Hamas controlling the city by itself, the region. And of course, the Islamic Jihad who launched this missile.
I know. We'll talk about what's happened in Israel in just a bit. Just one more question, really, about what's happened in Gaza. And with all of these reports suggesting that, it was a parking lot, not the hospital that's been targeted, do you believe that the death toll of 500 has been kind of created to ensure that there's an emphasis on the humanitarian crisis in Gaza that has been inflated?
I would say again, the events, the horrific events that took place in the south of Israel, not less than 2 weeks, only to remind you that there are kids that were not yet buried, not yet identified. But if you want to speak more, to put emphasis on the hospital in Gaza, I said that I say it again. In Gaza, people go, including terrorists, they go and hide in hospitals because it will never come to our minds in Israel to attack hospitals.
Okay, let's talk about what's happened in Israel. And since October 7th to today, there's still a lot of concern about hostages. We've spoken to many family members here who've had their loved ones taken hostage by Hamas, and they're all asking, when are we going to get any news about these people who've been taken in by Hamas? How is Israel really ensuring, or what's being done to ensure the safe return of these hostages, sir?
I'm very pleased that you mentioned the hostage crisis because, this is something that you must understand. It's an issue where all the international community has to put pressure with Israel in order to release those three people who, not only Israelis, you've got also other civilians over there, American civilians, French civilians, Romanian civilians, who were hijacked back to a territory, including a 9-month baby, including an 85-year-old Holocaust survivor. So what are we going? I would say one thing. Our target, our aim in this war, because it's not an operation, it's a war to bring them back
and
home.
what we've seen, Mr. Bismuth, this was about a week ago when you had these Hamas terrorists threatening that they'd actually kill these hostages one after another and then put it out on social media, much like what ISIS does. And I know that comparison has been drawn time and again by Israel. You're saying the international community has to come together. What do you want countries to do, especially since Israel is facing a challenge on that front? You've got extremely hostile neighbors. Most of the Middle East or West Asia has taken a stand where they're backing Palestine, where they're condemning what's happened in Gaza.
The fact that you made this comparison with ISIS is exactly, I mean, shows that you have understood exactly what is happening. We're exactly in the same situation. Hamas is ISIS. It's exactly what you said. But I wouldn't suggest them. I wouldn't suggest them. I wouldn't even want to think about such a scenario. On the contrary, I think after all the evil they have done, terrorism will be destroyed. That those civilians, those hijacked, civilians who are there have to be released as soon as possible.
There are some demands right now, Mr. Bismuth, and this has come even from one of Israel's allies, the UAE, for a ceasefire, and they're highlighting the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. What's your response to that?
I would say one thing, madam. Let's imagine now you have a family in the southern border of India, and terrorists come and they burn your child and they abuse you and they kill 1,400 of your neighbors. I mean, in a population of 9 million people. Will you speak to me about a ceasefire? Would you even think of a ceasefire? Or would you have the desire to demolish terrorism in order to make sure that this will never happen again? We have to understand one thing. Terrorism, the same way that Al-Qaeda and ISIS, you will not ask the question and you will think or you will demand the destruction of such a group.
No, I understand the emotion.
The same. Hamas has to be and will be destroyed.
I understand the emotion, Mr. Bismuth, but with all that's happened, and like I said, you know, everyone talking about the situation in Gaza right now, has there been essentially a delay in Israel's invasion plans? Is that still going to happen? I know you vowed to eliminate Hamas. Can that happen without a ground invasion, sir?
You must know one thing, first of all, again I say, we are not going or we're not aiming and we're not targeting civilians. I have no problem with any person in the world. The state of Israel wants to live in peace with Christians, with Muslims, with Buddhists, with Hindus, with Jews, with anyone. I mean, we, as I said before, we worship life and we appreciate any belief. We love living and we love the world and everything is okay. Yet, we have neighbors that exactly are the same branch like ISIS, like Al-Qaeda, like in the past, the Vandals and the Attila the Hun. This is how back I have to go in history in order to find the comparison to what has happened. Now, I know it started, you're talking about the ground operation. I have no idea. I know one thing. It started with an atrocity. It will finish with Hamas being demolished. This is, okay. I know it started. I know it will end. What happens in the middle, wait and see.
All right. Mr. Bismuth, thank you very much for taking the time out and joining us here on India Today. So that is an Israeli member of parliament making it very clear that nothing will come in the way of Israel's fight against Hamas right now and dismissing all talks of a humanitarian crisis in Gaza, saying talk first about what Hamas did to Israelis.